But I just want to come back to a point you made earlier, and just see if you can kind of expand on it a little bit. I think it's quite a nice one to kind of round up our conversation, because one of the things you talked about within services was intangibles. And when you compare that to goods and materials, quite binary, very solid, you can touch it and you feel it. And okay, with some services, you'll get delivery of a report or a strategic piece of advice, and maybe assets that can be reused in the future and things like that. But in terms of those intangibles and bringing them out, making them tangible, what do you see as the kind of key intangibles that need to be brought out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I think for me, it comes down a bit to the type of specification that you've got. So I think with a tangible thing, as we said earlier, it's very much input based specification. So talking about how big it is, how much it weighs, where it comes from, what its chemical properties are like, whatever. But very, and if you take that for a service, it doesn't work as well. So I mean, you can do it that way, and you can certainly say, I want this window cleaning service to be turning up every Tuesday, and I want it to clean these windows first for 30 minutes and then these for 20 minutes or whatever. But what tends to work a lot better is to say, take the sort of output specification route and say, well, actually, what I'm concerned about is that these windows are clean every week, so that when we do an inspection, they look clean. And however you do that is kind of up to you. Now that doesn't make the intangible tangible, but what it does is it makes the service a lot more. You're relying a lot more on the supplier and the supplier's expertise to work out how to do stuff, and that's always been one of the bugbears I've had with services, is that if you're too prescriptive, you have to ask why you're bothering outsourcing the service in the first place, because really, if you're the expert, you should probably just be doing it yourself if you know that much about it. So I think one of the ways, building from that you can kind of make it a bit more tangible, is if you give the supplier the freedom to work out how. There's nothing wrong then in asking the supplier to give you a kind of a statement of work or a delivery description of how they are going to deliver that, and then from that kind of method of work, you can work on developing measures and KPIs. And I think you do need to measure stuff to make things tangible. You need to be able to measure stuff. So even if it's quite an intangible idea, you're giving the supplier freedom to work out how to do it. They can give you a delivery program of their method of delivering that, and then you can build KPIs from that. And I think that's really important, because otherwise, what you get is the kind of the typical situation where someone says to you, I want to change the supplier, and you say, well, why? Well, they're not performing. Right, but how do we know they're not performing? When was the last time you did a performance review with them? We don't have those. Okay, well, what KPIs are they failing on? Sorry, what KPIs? What No, I just want to get rid of them. And you have to equate it to if you had a member of staff and they had a performance problem, would your first reaction be, let's sack them and get a new person in? Of course it wouldn't. Well, I hope not. You'd go through some sort of program to try and improve and work out what the issue is, and give the staff member time to kind of turn it around. And in the same way, you've really got to be doing that with suppliers, and you can't unless you've got these KPIs in place. So
Totally
measure.
Agree.
So the short answer to the question is measure. That's how you make it tangible. You measure stuff, and then you work on trends, but you basically agree what to measure, and then you measure it.
Yeah, and I think this is where things like change requests are very important, because these are complex services that are being delivered often, and
Yeah,
therefore you can have this collaborative approach with the supplier, particularly if you're in a bidding situation. If you put a requirement out to tender, then I think you get a much more unbiased approach of suppliers suggesting milestones, for example. And where organizations, maybe it's difficult to write a requirement because it's extremely specialist, and they're going out to specialist suppliers, cybersecurity or something like that, for example, it makes sense that those suppliers are going to have greater domain knowledge. And that as long as you can set out the overall objectives,
exactly.
they may be able to come to you and suggest ways that you can break that down and how they would deliver it. And some people might have a different approach to others. So I think within that bidding process, certainly something that we see is that you get that kind of collaboration where people can say, and we want you, here's the outline requirement. We want you to propose what the milestones and things would be, which can then be negotiated.
And then you can build the measures and the KPIs against their delivery, their methodology of delivering that thing. Because you're right, if you try and do the measures, the KPIs against your kind of vague objectives that you're trying to deliver, it's very hard. But if they take your outcomes that you want to achieve, tell you how they're going to do it, you can clearly create KPIs and ways of measuring that progress.